Welcome to tonight's psychology webinar, but it's more of a town hall aspect, as we've invited two of our traders, Megan, who's in the LA area, and David from Connecticut. They're two of our members that trade in the chat room and help out as contributors. So what tonight's format's going to be a little different. We're going to start out with Megan and David taking about 2-3 minutes to introduce themselves, tell us where they're from, some interesting things about, or an interesting thing about themselves, and then that many people may not know that they want to share. And then we'll turn it over to Dr. Katz. And the theme for tonight is best and worst psychology moments, but it may divulge into something else, and that's perfectly all right. And the goal of this and why we're trying this new format is if it's the hope that by members sharing their experiences, you can relate to it and then hear from Dr. Katz the things they did well, the things that they can improve on, and the things that they should sustain to keep their trading going in the right direction. So that's what we hope to accomplish today. Please give me feedback. Send me an email at mike@bearbulletraders.com on the feedback from this. If you liked it, if you'd like to see more of them, or if you'd like to see some other different type of thing, we can try that as well. So it's about improving and making the community better for everybody here and helping everybody out. So with that, Megan, I will turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Glad you're all here. It's good to see everyone tonight. So I'm Megan, and I live in LA. I am a chef, so I've had my own catering plant-based pop-up company for about 7 years. I started trading last year. I had some downtime in my business in between opening a new restaurant. And so at that time, I took on trading as kind of like a side hobby. And then I spent about 7 months working on getting the new restaurant up and running. We were opening a vegan bar, which I'm sure Norm would be very excited about. And then COVID happened, and unfortunately the restaurant kind of just got brushed to the side by the hospitality group that I was working with, and I've been home ever since. So I figured I would pick this up again, and I've just been doing it every day, working on it for 12 hours a day or so since mid-March. And I joined BBT, I think April is when I joined BBT. And yeah, that's kind of my backstory. Something interesting that no one in here probably knows because you're just kind of getting to know me, but I was recently on an episode of Chopped. So if you want to know anything about my personality, if you want to know anything
what episode?
So if you want,
I watch Chop all the time.
I know.
It's like season 43, episode 11, I think. It's called Cauliflower Power. But so if you want to understand the gist of me as a person and my personality, Chopped is the perfect explanation. I'm just crazy and driven, and I have very, very tough mentality, which has actually gotten me into more problems in trading than I thought it would do good. So that'll be very interesting to talk about with everybody. So that's me, and hi.
Awesome. David.
I'm David Smith, and David from Connecticut in the chat. And I'm coming up on 3 years with Bear Bull Traders. It was September 3 years ago. I had a few decades in the technology and software development business, is where I came out of. And I was winding down a small company I had and was looking to what can I develop to kind of carry me through my retirement, because I never saw myself retiring. But I felt like I was aging out on some of my skills from technology and software development as far as running the company I was doing. So I was looking for the next thing, and I was always interested in trading. I'm a finance major out of school and decided to start dabbling in it. Unfortunately, I wish I had found Bear Bull Traders 9 months before that when I started at the end of 2016, early 2017, because I read one book, thought I was hot stuff because my first month of trading, if you can believe, is still my best month of trading after 3.5 years. And a lot of that's because I was really taking a lot of risk that I didn't understand. And just because, the whole stonks only go up, well, they were going up in January of 2017. And we'll get into that a little bit. Something interesting about me, I can't say that I've been on Chopped, but I have been chopped by stocks many, many times. That's my closest thing to Chopped that I can talk about.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you, David. And for anybody, if there's questions that you want to ask, please post them in the question tab. I'll interject them as necessary throughout the conversation. So that way there's a place, because this is a discussion for all of us here in the community. And so with that, Dr. Katz, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Well, David and Megan, I do appreciate you being on board this evening. It's really good. My approach to tonight, and Mike and I have talked about this is in a certain way trying to kind of simulate what I normally would do when I have a trader who contacts me and wants to kind of work on their performance. And so part of that is kind of getting to know each of you, and that intro was very helpful. What I would say to everybody out there is, the more honest and open David and Megan can be, and the more candid they can be, the better, because that is a way that I think that I could offer the greatest insight or feedback to them. But I want everybody to be mindful out there that even though there's not a firm confidentiality in this kind of setting, be mindful of that. People are going to be talking maybe about sensitive things about their professional life. And so I would just caution people just to use discretion and be mindful of that because, again, people's Megan and David's openness and honesty can hopefully be a positive thing, but there's a whole community out there. And I just would want people to just take responsibility for kind of respecting the kind of information that they might provide and we might talk about tonight. So what's very interesting for both of you is clearly the backstory is vastly different. Your backgrounds, your involvement in trading, that's what makes all this interesting. And I guess one of the first places to start is maybe each of you could speak to kind of the areas of trading that you've been thinking about the most. It could be areas, problematic areas. This has been a very stressful time in the world, a great deal of uncertainty. And I guess what I would want to maybe start with is what are first and foremost the kinds of things that come to each of you? As Mike said, I know that we've been talking about best and worst trades. But those are kind of best and worst trades are a byproduct of people's trading process, what they do well, what they struggle with. So maybe each of you could talk a little bit from the get-go on the kinds of things that you feel are most important to you in terms of your trading and what you have been working on individually in your kind of trading career here.
Sure. David, do you want to start?
No, I can start if you'd like. I think for me, I feel 2020, even with the whole lockdown scenario and all the craziness and all the added stress, some of that's provided me some time to really delve even more than I have in the previous 3 years, into really developing myself, my mindset. And I feel, I mentioned it when I was doing my intro, because I traded 9 months on my own. I had a lot of ups and downs, and I was swaying this way and that, and I was just trying to find myself as a trader. Then I joined BBT, and I, really was taken by Andrew's book. That's why I found the community. I really enjoyed the community, and I traded in sim for the first time, and I thought, wow, this sim trading is great. I'm training myself up at the end of 2017. I'm going to have a great 2018, and I went into 2018 with high hopes, and I took my biggest lumps so far were in 2018, and a lot of it was, I think I was trying to relearn everything I had learned, thought I had learned. I was back and forth you know, and lots of traders are going to feel this, and you know, anyone who's traded will feel this over a period of time. You read something, you want to run and change your platform. You want to change your time frame. You want to, you know, you want to change what strategies you're looking at. And I finally feel that, you know, loss management, discipline, I've really, you know, I think I've put in the time and, you know, earned my stripes, so to speak, on that front. And the main thing I'm trying to work on now is reducing the stress in taking trades. And I think for me, my biggest challenge and hurdle right now is, okay, I can read patterns well, I can get in at the right time, but it's really extending those profits. That's where I'm having the most difficulty. I've gotten consistency in my trading from being green consistently, but I'm just not, you know, I'm not ready to scale up even bigger because I don't feel I've mastered. And I don't mean trading is a forever learning process. I don't mean mastering, you know, perfectly. I'm talking about control that I feel comfortable within myself, looking inwards, of managing my trades to, you know, their fulfillment, their right end, and what makes sense for their end. And I think a lot of it's just cutting it short. You know, maybe the stresses of this year and some other things in outside have weighed in on it. But I think that for me, my biggest challenge right now is managing the end of the trade. You know, not that it's profitable. I know how to manage it to be profitable, but managing to maximize, because then I can grow my account and, you know, so on and so forth.
Okay, so this is a very kind of a good place to start. I say the good news here is what you've experiencing is a very common scenario. Again, misery may love company only if the company is miserable. But this is a common scenario, but it doesn't just go away, of course, automatically. And I think, you know, this is something we've talked about in the chat room and the webinars in the past. It's about the kind of the psychology of allowing your winners to run, to maximizing your profits. And there's a huge psychological component on that. People may get into a stock at 10 and feel like their target is 15, and before you know it, when it hits 12, they take all their profits and they don't know, and it does run to 15, and they haven't allowed themselves to put themselves out there. This is a pretty common scenario. And I think one of the things that happens is, and I think for both of you, because in the scope of trading as a career, you're both very early on, and there's no substitute in trading for getting repetitions. You know, seeing trade after trade, day after day, year after year. Reps are a huge thing in most professions, and getting that kind of experience is enormously important. I think that the psychological component is that often people want to be right in their trading, so they're much more feel better about taking, like you said, David, some of the profits and not allowing things to kind of, as you said, you know, kind of play out to their fruition. And it may not be the scaling up, but it's really often like a psychological plan. I think the first step is, and a good thing for you, is a level of awareness that you have that this is going on. A lot of people play out certain scenarios and they're not really aware. And one of the ways of kind of, and this is where I mentioned we live in a world of uncertainty, because I think we all have to recognize, and Megan will get to you because I'm sure that was enormously stressful with your business just getting to start up and having the legs taken out from you in terms of that. But there's stressors that we're all facing that none of us have faced before. And I think it's unreasonable to think that that isn't impacting in certain ways, consciously sometimes and unconsciously, the trading and the psychology behind the trading. So very often in this situation, it's hard to have the freedom psychologically to allow yourself to really play things out in the way that you want to. And so one of the things, David, that you may want to think about just in terms of this is to kind of ease some of the psychological strain and build some of the confidence in letting some of your trades, your winners run, so to speak, is to kind of have a plan where maybe you have an intermediary step where you try to scale in, where you don't put so much pressure on yourself on the trade that you get in at 10 that you target is 15 and you find yourself getting out at 12, is that maybe you have a plan that when it hits 12, you take off half of the trade and you can feel good about the profits. And then that eases some of the stress in terms of then letting it run. So I think part of this is developing plans, seeing what some of the impediments are, and then trying to work on a real plan to kind of address that by also understanding the psychology of trying to feel more comfortable in kind of building confidence in your trades kind of working out for you. Megan, maybe you could just talk a little bit yourself about some of the things that you're kind of feel like you're working on, things that you're finding have taken up most of your mental time and energy in terms of the trading front.
Yeah, so trading has been really interesting for me because what I've always done has been more blue collar work, but with the business side because I've run my own business. So I've done all the mental part with the business, but I've also done blue collar, which, makes me kind of have this very high pain threshold. And when I got into trading, people kept saying, use your strengths, use your strengths, use your strengths, do what works for you, do what works for you. Well, my strength was just like hulking out, pushing through, working 5 days in a row without any sleep, standing on my feet. I did a Spartan race once where I sprained my ankle a mile in and I finished the race, and then I was on crutches for 2 months, and I did a whole catering event for 50 people while on crutches. I can push through so much that it was working for a while until it wasn't working. And then, I lost 30% of my account. And I mean, that's a lot. And it's after having, also worked to try to, I was working on opening a restaurant that kind of, fell apart. And when something like that happens, I think that your brain goes into, I just want to win. This was a failure and now I want to win. And I'm using my strength to try to make me win this game of trading. And for a while it was working, and now it's kind of pushing against me, and my strengths are actually kind of working the opposite way.
Well, it's interesting because, clearly, I do think I understand what you're saying is trading is not something that you're going to power through in the same way that you finish that race or kind of work 12 hours on a catering shift and managing all the kinds of things. But I wouldn't minimize the resilience and the inner kind of mental strength that you possess, and that some of that is absolutely transferable. It's probably transferable in the kind of discipline and kind of in ways that you'll need that kind of most accurately with trading. It's a different kind of mental strength, and I think you say more like you've had the physical powering through things, and I think what you've seen is sometimes more is not always better when it comes to trading. As a matter of fact, some of the best trades people have made are the ones that they don't make. And that kind of discipline not to do more and more and more and push through. It is a different mentality. And I think that is actually a very interesting thing. So I think setting up trading as a life, given what's happened in your career situation, makes perfect sense. But I think it is going to be important because psychologically, this is going to take a different kind of frame of mind in order to kind of be successful. So I don't think it sounds like you have, again, the fortitude and, the intestinal fortitude to kind of work through very difficult situations, which I think will serve you very well. I think, though, probably one of the things that sounds like is going to be very important for you to work on is patience and not judging, going in a patient, gradual, incremental, process-oriented manner, and not taking that as my hunch is that would trigger for you probably a sense that you're not doing enough, you're not accomplishing enough, that it's not happening fast enough. Probably in your previous profession, you could make things happen in a way that the markets don't really care how hard you're working. They're not really. And I think part of this is kind of recognizing that you're not in total control of this. One of the advantages of your other job was that, man, if it's on you, and if it just meant more work, harder work, more effort. And here, it's a different kind of work and effort. And sometimes that work and effort is recognizing that you don't have full control of what the markets present. But you do have full control of your decision making. And so I think patience and assessing your success in a very different way is going to be very helpful. Probably early on, you're not going to get dollar for dollar, nearly dollar for dollar, what you had in your previous profession. So you can't, you're going to have to adjust with that. And so what you think is maybe chump change over here on a trading front compared to what you made, for a full day's catering, that's a tough adjustment. But this is why the measurement stick needs to be very different. This is a gradual incremental process. And David, when you said, just to get back to your situation, you started off trading and you had that first great several months. I had one trader that I worked with a bunch of years ago who started off like that. And I have to say, his personality seemed very different than yours, to your credit. He was a little bit more of a cowboy in his general personality. So his getting off to a good start, his approach was, man, I got this. I mean, like trading, piece of cake. I mean, he was already in his mind, like, adding zeros to his bank account. And it was really hard because after 6 months, he had a serious reality check. And it wasn't even as problematic financially for him. It was such an emotional blow because he had, through no fault of his own, started to believe that this was kind of something he understood and was going to be immediately good at. And so all of a sudden, he had that come to Jesus moment where he had to face the fact that this is really hard, that this is a profession that even people who do it full time, who are incredibly hardworking and very smart, there are not that many people who can be that successful at it. It's very difficult, and it takes that ongoing kind of work. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to throw in there, Mike.
Oh,
if not, that's fine.
Yeah, I relate so much with you, Megan, on all I got to do is work harder and it will work out, because that's really the same mentality that I had when I first started trading. Was all I have to do is I got to read these books, I got to put the effort in, I got to develop a strategy, I got to employ my discipline. But as long as I just work harder than the person next to me, I'll come out on top. And to your point, it might get you somewhere, but it isn't going to get you to where you want to go. So I relate solidly with that.
It definitely gets you started, because in my businesses that I did outside and things I do outside of trading, it could be anything. It could be working on a project around the house. I always pride myself on being willing to do the things that other people are not willing to do, which a lot of times is the bread and butter of being in a consulting business, which I was doing. You're just willing to do things that you're willing to work all night if you have to. You're willing to meet certain deadlines. And I tried that initially with trading. I read that first book and I jumped into it. But since then, the amount I've read, it's been tons. The amount of charts I've looked at, and at some point, I'm finding myself in the last few months especially, I'm doing so much less of that. And I'm doing better. And it's not because I'm not engaged, and it's nothing like that. I just needed to settle down my mind, stabilize on what my platform looks like every day, stabilize on my exact 4 strategies that are in my I finally made a playbook, all those things. And it's like physically having it, is it different than just having it in my mind? To me, it is, because now it's like, this is your Bible. This is what you are going to trade. And then it's actually also something I could work hard on and get done and to feel good about, so. Yeah.
And listen, I think having that plan, that strategy, these are kind of key things. This process, as we've talked about, is hugely important. And part of that is also, I think, when you're used to doing that hands-on kind of work, what often people forget about is working on the kind of the emotional psychological variables, the psychology routine, how you approach each day from a mental standpoint. Often we think, I work a lot with high-level athletes, and you'll ask them what's their practice routine, what's their preparation for competition routine, and they have a very kind of defined, routinized kind of plan to get their bodies in shape. And then ready for competition. And then you say to them, so what's your mental routine? And, it's a little all over the place. I listen to a little music here. And it's just when you think about how much of high-level performance on an athletic front and a trading front has to do with one's psychology, often I see a great disparity between the time and energy people put into their emotional psychological preparation and they're kind of in trading more of the technical, reading charts, doing the research, reading the news, all that kind of stuff, which is essential. That you know, an athlete, if they didn't train, couldn't perform. I don't care how mentally strong they were. So you need to have all that kind of work. But I think, and part of the initial thing, I think, for every person is kind of building your own awareness about how you are wired, your own strengths and weaknesses, where your vulnerabilities are psychologically and emotionally. And really kind of not criticizing yourself, knowing where those are, recognizing them, what the triggers are for your trading and how certain emotional reactions can really contribute to positive trading experiences, and also aware the kinds of situations that happen when you trade that can trigger kind of some negative reactions and things that are not very helpful. And I think the key is this, and you're both kind of in very different places on this, is having this kind of open growth mindset, as we talked about. Like, how do you kind of build those kinds of characteristics and patterns that could kind of help you in your approach? You know, maybe since the topic here was best trades and worst trades, maybe, Megan, you could start maybe by just giving everybody just an illustration of, you know, the highs and lows, you know, Megan, a great trade, and Megan, who wants to get back in bed and throw the covers over her head kind of trade.
Yeah, actually it's interesting. I'm kind of similar to David. My first month was my best month. And, you know, a lot of the moderators in the chat were like, this could really be bad for you. And I was like, no, that's fine. But I mean, my first 2 days were amazing. Like, I made so much money, and, you know, that just set the bar for me. And everything after that was just not quite enough. Like, I could be up green for the day and it could be a big amount, but it wasn't what it was previously. And so getting my brain to be like, this is still green, has been like very important and probably one of the turning points for me. So my best trades were in the very beginning. My worst trades were actually last month. And I probably lost just as much as I made in my first month. And I think there was a webinar where someone said, you know, we talk about 1% of the account or 2% of the account or whatever. And when you have like a not super huge account, 1% is not that much to make in a day. And for me, someone who has had, you know, a very good career and worked with very wealthy clients, it's pocket change. And when I came into trading, you know, last month, and I was having these days where I was making pocket change and just kept going, it was just, I lost pretty much everything. I lost basically the house. So best trades in the beginning, worst trades last month.
Right. And so interesting thing, it sounds like, is that you know, we've talked a lot about the importance of process versus outcome. And it sounds like you were making good trades because you were focused on the process you were doing. Then you were looking at the money and you were saying, yeah, pocket change, what's up with this? We got to go more. And so then you're thinking about the outcome. I'm making X, man, that's nothing. I got to make 5X in order to feel good. And then the focus becomes on making 5X. And this is the kiss of death kind of, you know, process where people then focus on the outcome. And it is very hard because there's no guarantee of the outcome. But one of the guarantees of focusing on outcome is that if you focus on that, your process will fail and that will lead to bad results. So this is a very common scenario that as people kind of do well, they start comparing themselves or they starting wanting to do better. And it's done in a very kind of limited way. Very often people want to do better because the end game is to make the money, but they really need to focus on how they can continue their process in a kind of more sustained kind of growing kind of way. David, how about yourself? Any kind of highlights and lowlights that you think would help illustrate what you've gone through?
Definitely, you know, when I don't want to go through all the valleys of despair I've walked through, and all of the non-compassionate language in my trading journal. That was in the early days when I would yell at myself, and you read that and you kind of, at least I can laugh at it now. But just in a constructive way. My best trades now, it's not about how much you make. It's totally about, feeling comfortable about your entry. It's the stuff we hear all the time, but it's actually very true. Entering the trade with the right size, not the size to make a lot of money, but the size that makes sense for your account, for your risk in this trade. And then those partials out, that gives me the most joy in trading, when that happens. And it leading into the bad side, or my troubled trading, it's even if I have a red day, if it started out with a green trade, I'm usually fine with it. My worst case scenario for me, at least in the past, because I wasn't as good as disciplined with my stops and so on in years gone by, but if I have that first trade, I jump into early, it's a knee-jerk trade, and you get down early, you get that hole early. That whole catch-up mentality has always been my nemesis. In the early days, it was sizing up, trying to get out of a hole, making things worse. Happened all the time. And now I had something in the outside of trading really put some stress on me at the end of June into July. July was my worst month this year. And it wasn't bad overall, but it was my worst month. And a lot of it was my first trade or two were red. And then for like 4 of the days that were red in July, which were my biggest red days of the year, those 4 were because, and it wasn't because of stops or anything. That's all of the trades were within my risk, and I lost that trade risk. But I took, I never take 10 trades. I was taking 10 trades, and I only trade the first hour. So that's a lot of trades to be taken in the first hour. For me, the worst moments are getting down early because you jump in too quickly on something. So that's the patience that I've put myself in rehab for August and now September. I'm back to where I should be. But getting down early has always been the worst for me. And then you have to, and I say, that whole thing, I have had notes that say, you can walk away, just stop. And then you can have all those notes all you want, but if you don't actually practice that, when you're in the heat of the battle and the chat room's going and everybody's trading like crazy, if you don't practice when you really want to be there, just getting up and walking away, you're never going to do it. You just don't do it, in my experience.
Right. This is listen, you speak to a couple of points. Some of the key ingredients, of course, for a good trading psychology is, to have a plan, right? I mean, that's the key thing, to have a plan and a process and what you're going to do. Now, then Mike and I have talked often about the importance of discipline in following through on that plan. But any high-level performer, has a set plan and is focused on a plan and an execution of that plan. So the more committed you are to a plan, then it kind of makes it easier to kind of follow through. This is where then the focus becomes a huge thing, right? Because if you are focused, without a plan, there's nothing to focus on, of course. But a plan in itself, you could write up the greatest plans in the world, and then you're distracted and you're not really laser focused on executing it. That becomes really an important thing. And then I think you speak to another thing, which is the fact, especially when you have a plan and you're focused and you execute on it, it doesn't always go right. So that means this is where the importance of being calm and being even-keeled emotionally becomes really important. Like you said, sometimes if you're not that way, getting up and taking a walk, getting off away from the screen is important. But as I've said many times, I've seen many a trader say, okay, that's what I'm going to do. They leave the screen for 10 minutes. They take a walk. They're cursing themselves out. They're pissed at the world. They come back to the screen. They're just as angry, and they go back at it. And they look at me and go, see, man, I took a walk. I took a break. I said, yeah, well, I guess we have to get in the weeds a little more. When you need to break, you need to be a little more constructive in your break. Taking a break inherently isn't beneficial if you're going to use that time to beat yourself up and tell yourself you're the world's worst trader. So these are the kinds of things, though, you have to learn through trial and error. But, calm is really a key thing. But here's one of the things that I think is key, which a lot of traders don't really think about. Some people call it purpose. I think during one's quiet moments, one really needs to really make a personal decision of how committed they are to trying to be a good trader. This is really a personal commitment thing. This is something that when you're laying there quietly at night in bed, that is just a kind of a decision you have to make. If this is really something that you are committed to doing and is important to you, then it's, then this is really where you have to demonstrate positive, constructive steps to work on your trading. It doesn't mean you're not going to be upset. You're not going to get pissed off and angry if you lose money and all of that. But to me, a commitment to getting better means that you're trying as best you can to do things that are positive and constructive. That's a very personal decision. And if people don't want to do that, that's fine. But you can't expect things to get considerably better in a difficult profession like trading without a certain level of commitment to that process. It's too hard. It's just not something that people can just do over a consistent period of time. Each of you've talked about periods where it's like, man, I got this. This is a piece of cake. I'm good to go. And then, you get slapped in the face. And so that's why I think that sustained commitment and purpose. What is this? For a lot of people, initially, it could be money. But the best traders I've seen find an inner purpose, a desire to master something, to excel at something. Even people who have made exorbitant amounts of money, they have a motivation to really want to excel, to be great. So we all have different purposes in life. And all I'm saying is that you really need to kind of get in touch with your own purpose in doing this, because that's going to be the foundational kind of support to work through, especially the difficult periods.
Yeah.
So now here's, go ahead, Mike.
Oh, I just wanted to say, so going off of both them, we talked about earlier, right, that working hard and getting there. That's what drove me to my lowest point, because as everybody in the room knows, I'm very analytical in how I look at trading, and I develop a plan, and I had the plan, I had the process, I had everything in place, that I had read the books, stayed up late, testing strategy, and now I had my plan, right? And then there was the market shifted, and it was a week and a half, and my plan no longer worked. And when I think it had to have been 11 or 12 trades into it, there was just no way that it was profitable anymore. And to literally be able to look at myself knowing, how did I go from being profitable, doing this exact same thing, reviewing my journals, saying, I'm sticking to my process, I'm sticking to my plan, I put all this effort in, and then having to go, it's not working anymore. You need to figure something out. And I literally, you all laugh when I said this, but I literally that day took my trade book, snapped it in half, walked outside and threw it in the trash and said, I got to start over. I just got to start over. And that's what I did. And I went back over and I just said, all right, what strategy can I work on that is working in the market that we have now that I need to develop? And I just started from there. So it doesn't matter how long you've been trading, the market may shift on you. And if you want to try to fight it, it can be painful. And it was painful that week and a half that I was trying to force my strategy on the market because it worked before.
Yeah. I think the market is undefeated so far in its battles against individual traders.
I agree.
It's kind of like in athletics, age is undefeated. Age always wins out, for high-level athletes. So here's an interesting thing. I'm just wondering from each of you what might be kind of something to bring up. Is there something along the spectrum of what we've been talking about that has been difficult for each of you, maybe during more of your dark moments of trading, to kind of acknowledge or allow yourself to think about something that's been very difficult or that you've been struggling with or contemplating. And I would say this more about, during dark moments, because when things are going well, the biggest risk during those times is really more overconfidence and how do you tap that down. But when things are not going well, people often go to places about their trading and their abilities that sometimes can be very difficult and painful. And sometimes there's the desire to push it under the carpet and not deal with it. So I'm just wondering if there might be things that you wanted to talk about or to share. Maybe there's some insight that I could provide and some feedback about some of the more kind of difficult moments that are currently going on in your trading, even if they're just kind of intermittent or periodic.
I'll start out that way they can, because I literally had to do that. I had to identify it. And it really evolved around that low point in my trading career when I was about ready to throw in the towel and say, I'm just done with this. It was, my personality prevented me from separating my personal worth from my trading results. So if my trading was negative, I naturally felt terrible the rest of the day. If I did well, all right, it was good. And when I got for a week and a half just miserable, it was like, why am I trading? If this is what it's going to be like, you're going to have times of this. And I finally had to look at myself and just say, you know what? Who cares if you win? Who cares if you lose? It doesn't matter. Nobody out there cares. The only person that cares whether you win or lose is me. So that was really the defining point that I've had to struggle with, and right. I keep an eye on.
And I think some of this is two things that Mike points out for him was like maybe an over-identification that trading becomes who you are, and that somehow if you're trading poorly, you're no longer a good person. This over-identification with one's career women tend to have a more balanced sense, I think, in a healthy, more constructive way. Men towards to more identify and define themselves by their career. And I think also Mike spoke to another key thing there, which is more of the style, the kind of the tendency towards perfectionistic kind of behavior, and that you want to do this well. You're used to being able to make it right. You're used to being able to work hard and get it to where it is. And sometimes learning to forgive yourself and be a little easier on yourself. Not that you can't be upset with when you don't do well, but to acknowledge that, losing trades, poor trades are kind of inherent part of the trading process. And that you have to kind of find a way to acknowledge and be accepting of that if you're going to be able to maintain a certain level of kind of emotional, even keeledness in that. So I guess wonder with the two of you whether there's any thoughts kind of along the lines of what Mike shared tonight on that.
I definitely think, I can totally relate to what Mike just said, because I don't know how many resets I did to get where I am today. So I feel good about that. The question I have for you is, part of it's what part of the brain does the whole rationalization and kind of persuasive talk, self-talk come from? And how do you manage? It's I think in cartoons, it would always be the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other shoulder. And the talk that you do within your mind when you're trying to manage your day. I'm not talking about any one trade. It's the
you're talking about negative.
I could take another trade, or, if I do this, if I do this, I can get my day back on track. Like it's almost like the sweet talking you do to yourself to keep yourself going. And sometimes it can be very destructive. It's not constructive. And I'm talking about not taking a walk and yelling at myself. I'm talking about being calm, but talking yourself into maybe continuing for the day when you shouldn't, when you should stop.
Okay, so very often we do that because there's a lot of things are triggered and guided by our feelings of comfort and discomfort. And so in that situation, let's just take it in slow motion. Let's say even saying you're remaining calm and you take a walk because the day's not going well. But then you find yourself, the pattern is that you get yourself coming back to the screen and taking several more trades throughout the day, even though you're feeling, you think, relatively calm and focused, and you're trading really poorly. Well, part of it is because you're probably down on the day, and there's a certain level of discomfort that's associated with that. You don't want to feel like you haven't traded well, that you haven't made money. And really what's going to bring you a increased sense of self and confidence and more positive feelings is if you turn that around and turn green. So I think sometimes the mind unconsciously pushes you in that direction, where sometimes clearly losing $10 in a day is better than losing 100. But very often being able to sit with the loss of $10 and then having to sit with that until the next day is something that's a level of discomfort that people don't often want to sit with, because they then have to find a way to kind of deal with the fact that they weren't successful in their mind on that day. So I think this is where having to kind of be willing to sit with that discomfort a little more, like kind of acknowledge that losing days are part of what goes on, and that is not in itself problematic, and that you're showing kind of inner strength if you can follow through in your process. And if you're all out of whack in certain days because you didn't get enough sleep, or you're kind of really upset that second half of the day, stepping away is the most positive thing that you could do. So I think this is where you said where you journal a lot, and that's very helpful to see those patterns. And my hunch is for you, what you've said is that there may be patterns that get played out when you start the day down or red, in that may get you off your game, because there's almost unconsciously a push so much to not want to feel like you're having a losing day. And that may actually not be conducive to following your plan and your process.
I definitely agree with that. Because, my day is typically, I get up I'm on the East Coast. I get up at 7. I'm at my desk by 7:30. So I spend 2 hours, and it's not so much I have to spend 2 hours to prep, but it makes me comfortable to spend the time reading the news, looking at charts, and then, if you take a trade quickly at 9:35, so after 2 hours and 5 minutes, you're down, and it really is a punch in the face.
So I guess what I would suggest to that is, I think, speaking to my earlier point, what may be useful is, since you actually, to your credit, give yourself a lot of prep time, is I would put in there a couple things. I would put in a mental kind of routine component there to focus on your mental game. How are you feeling? To check in with how are you feeling? What are some of the recent patterns that you've had emotionally? What are some of the recent triggers if things go well or if things go poorly? Kind of touching all the bases. One of the things that could be very calming for people is sometimes people doing their own kind of gratitude check. Gratitude can be a very helpful thing for us, just in terms of an appreciation of kind of what we have as opposed to what we don't have. And very often gratitude can help us think about more positive emotions, keep negative emotions at bay. With a lot of gratitude, often it helps with resilience and stress. And so one of the things that may be useful to kind of get your mind in a day is just actually, I sometimes tell people to spend 5 minutes writing down 3 things that they might be grateful for, big or small, trading or not trading, and just spending a few minutes reflecting on those. Each day, they could be vastly different. And it just kind of gets your mind a little calmer and a little more focused on things that you're appreciative of. And it might then carry over. If you do that in a regular way, it becomes habitual, and you might be in a better mindset. And then this gets into the whole thing about, maybe also adding some mindfulness kinds of things, whether it's meditation or some exercise in the morning, things that kind of tap into different things other than getting yourself more kind of knowledge-based or intellectually ready for the day.
How about you?
Megan, how about yourself? Yeah.
Yeah, something that I've been, struggling with on my reddest, darkest days is that I'm usually in a trade that's going really well and I'm profitable and I'm holding it and taking partials, and then I continue to hold it all the way back to break even, and it's a good trade, but then I've seen what the profit could have been if I would have just gotten all out a lot sooner instead of holding it when the trade was turning against me. And what happens is, because I've seen that, now I go and get back into a trade because I was like, oh, I could have had an extra $100. I should go take another trade so I can get that $100 that I could have had on this last one. And my whole day turns against me, and I end up going from taking 2 trades, which I normally would take on a good day, 2 or 3 trades, to taking like 20 trades. And my day is just completely red. So 2 things in that I have questions about is, one, how do I just stop myself, first of all?
Yeah.
But, another question is there because we get into these loops and these a lot of self-talk of it's okay, you're going to be fine, let's just take another trade, let's do this, let's do that, or let's hold on to it. And is there something that I can tell myself to snap myself out of it? If there was a floor manager here, right, they would come by and they'd be like, what are you doing? Go. I'm just looking for that, because I'm constantly talking to myself, but I need something to snap myself out of it.
Well, there's 2 parts about that. One is actually there's work that probably would be beneficial for you to do during non-trading hours. To your credit, you have identified a very a very distinct pattern for yourself. That there is, when you have trades like that you have done well and then given back the profits, that triggers then a situation for you emotionally that you get totally away from your process and your plan. And now you're off to the races on just throwing things against the wall and hoping they stick. So although you may want a floor manager, which would be great, the problem with just that is that you have to take ownership and accountability of that as the first step. And part of that is recognizing that situation, that pattern exists. So you may want to have a little, during your pre-trading day mental reminder routine, is to really be mindful. Okay, so let me see, I hope this doesn't happen, but let me be mindful. If I get this kind of scenario, I'm in a risky position. Maybe I need to immediately take a break, step away, get myself back into a kind of reset position, and not your revenge trade, which is what you're doing. You want to feel better. You want this to be different. And all of a sudden you've thrown out the window, any kind of process and strategy that you have. So I think actually you've identified the situation, which is step 1. Step 2 is then I think at that point, you need a reset during those things. So sometimes it may be useful to just start taking a little bit of a break to calm yourself down, review what happened, kind of then reset to what it is you want to do getting back to trading, and recognize that if that revenge trading feeling is still there, then you're going to have to hold off a little longer. You're going to need a little more of a time frame to kind of settle your emotions down, because what you've described is that when you get back to the screen, it's totally emotional trading. It's no longer about making good trading decisions. And so I think sometimes the absence of the negative is the first step. Stopping yourself from doing that is the first step. The next step is then to get yourself reset so you can make good trading decisions afterwards. But what you first want to do is stop making poor trading decisions after good trades have gone against you.
Awesome. Hey, we got some questions in the questions tab that I kind of want to interject. They're going to pretty much everybody in the panel here. And that way we can close this out over the next 5-10 minutes with them. So the first one that I like very much here comes from X the Unknown. And he's headed into his 3rd temp to try to go to live trading. And his question's to you, Megan and David. When he goes to live, that fear comes in of taking the trade, no matter how small he puts on risk. And he's just wondering, do you experience that same fear, and how did you get over it when you made those transition?
That's a really good question. For me, and I don't know if this would be helpful, but I didn't have that fear so much because I'm such like a person that just dives into things. It came afterwards, right? Like everything was going great, diving in. And then for me, when things started to turn against me, then the fear started to happen because now I've recognized what could happen.
Megan wanted to touch the stove. Then when the hand got burned, she said, "Oh, I better keep some distance from the stove."
100%. Like that is totally my personality.
There we go. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I don't believe that's hot. I'm going to check it out.
But she comes back then. She comes back the next day and goes, "Maybe that stove isn't hot today."
Or not as hot.
Not as hot. So for you, David, we have a question. Members looking at your whiteboard in the background and thinks they're motivational quotes, and is wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing a couple if that's what they are.
Oh, this back here?
Yeah, they see it, but
that's
they can't
all
read it.
Mark Douglas. That's trading in the zone stuff. So that's not even mine. I put that up like 2 years ago, probably. I had read Trading in the Zone, and it just resonated a lot of the things with me. So, I mean, if anybody has read it, it's the 5 truths. It's the, determine your risk. It either works or it doesn't. Move on to the next trade. It's that kind of stuff. And most importantly, I had to learn early on, I take responsibility for my trading. And to go back to that previous question, I don't think you ever get over, quote unquote, the fear. The fear is going to, or feeling uncomfortable. I think the fear morphs to more just energy. It's not quite nervous energy, but there's always there's a certain thrill to being in the market, I think, because I like to trade the first hour. I've tried over the years to trade other times a day. It just doesn't, I don't do as well. I can't read I like it crazy. The thing is, I just have to reel in the quickness right after the market opens, because I can't read it. I've learned that I can't read that first couple of minutes, but I don't think the fear, for me, the fear, the raw fear doesn't go away, but or it does go away, but you always have that nervous energy, because it's real money, unless you're playing with someone else's money, it's your money.
Both things can exist. You can feel kind of this low-level anxiety, which just is your body and mind's way of preparing yourself for competition and for what's going on. So both things can exist. You can feel that and still make good trading decisions. I think a lot of times people say, I have to feel perfectly great in order to trade well. Well, and they're measuring perfectly great as like when I work with athletes, like the athletes who are not anxious when they're before a game starts are the ones I'm most worried about because they're not ready. Same thing with traders. There's always a kind of a level of anxiety that's there, and it's just your own level of readiness.
Yeah. Interesting about the trading in the zone quotes that you have up there. I actually, part of my morning routine is to go through those 5 principles that he talks about of consistency and read that every morning. And that's kind of how I assess my mental capacity based on how well I can focus in on those. Roman here has...
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say in my playbook, I have a whole section on the key points of all the books I've read, but I go through that every weekend.
Yeah, it's a great habit to get into if you're not doing it. Roman has a great question, so we'll do 2 more questions, this one and one other. But he has a question, how many trades on average do you all take? He's trading between 20 and 30 and thinking he should have a limit like 10 or 5.
I look at it this way. I mean, depends on where you are. You can trade, as many as you want if you're managing each trade properly. My max is usually less than 5. And And I 3 is just my sweet number. I like 3. And
I'm with you, David. Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels better. I know when I do more, it's a problem. But that's
also,
me. For
like,
me.
if you're taking journaling seriously, I've mentioned this before to Mike, if you're taking 20 to 30 trades and you have to go back through and journal all of those and talk about why you took every single one of those, it's torture. It's like you're spending a whole day going back through like all these trades that most of them probably went poorly. So if you keep the numbers small, your journaling less, and it gives you more focus to focus on those trades and really pay attention to what's going well and what's going poorly.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you need to consider, Roman, is that if you're taking that many trades to hit a certain objective, meaning you have a certain account size and you have the ability to do that, my recommendation is consider focusing in on the best handful of trades and just sizing up in those. If you're willing to put so much money at risk that whole day in taking that many trades, take less trades and put a little more at risk in each one of those trades.
Yeah.
And what you will see is over people's careers and how they manage it and their trading decisions, this will evolve over time for people based on their experience level, their success too. So what may be true at point A in your career may be different at points B and C as well.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the last question that for everybody is, how do you know if you should change your system or that you are having a losing streak and you should keep going with your plan?
Well, I definitely was on a losing streak in July. And I knew it was a losing streak. It was before Nas did his "How do you recover from a losing streak?" Presentation. So I could have used that one, but for me, it was I went back to my journal and looked through each thing, and you have to define what you think is the root cause of your issues. If you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I was trading the right size and the right plan and the right thing and the market was just against me, that's one thing. For me, a lot of it was, okay, I was over trading, that's a problem, that's a strike. Another thing might be, it wasn't a real A setup. It was B-ish, maybe even C-ish sometimes. There's a lot of, hope in there. So that's the thing. You need to go back and look at what you're doing or what you've done and compare it with what your plan was, as you said, Dr. Katz, and then decide, is it my mental state? Is it my technical strategy? Is it something else?
Yeah. And again, I would also think it's important to just make sure that sometimes you don't get caught in these terms, hot streak, losing streak, and that you just try to focus on, each individual trade. I do think it's important to look at the macro picture. Like you said, maybe there's certain things that you're doing on a pattern wise. But I also think that people can overwhelm themselves by start labeling they're on a losing streak when they just lost a few trades in a row, as opposed to focusing on how to make the next good trading decision.
Yeah, it's important, very important for you to be able to track the results of your trading in that macro point of view. When I took my trade book and broke it in half and threw it in the trash can, sure, there was some anger there, issues. I'll admit that, but but it was because I had the stats from previous that it was successful, and then over this 1.5 week period, plus even the 2 weeks before that, the strategy was not producing like it was 2 weeks before. So with it naturally degrading, I went back and I looked at myself and I was like, I'm trading this the right way. I'm following my process. It's not working anymore. And that's when I cut it. And that's why I got got angry because I had put so much effort into it. I knew it was the strategy because the market changed because of conditions in the outside world. So that's why I went to it. So with that, I would like to say thank you, Dr. Katz, for being here. And Megan and David, thank you very much for taking the time out of your schedule to share some personal stories and personal experiences with everybody in the room. I hope everybody got something out of this. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Dr. Katz.